Good evening, dear listener. Let me invite you into a tale that begins in the glow of opulence, but quickly descends into the shadows of long-buried secrets. Picture a grand ballroom filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and an air of generosity. At the center of it all stands Birthmark, a man whose wealth and charm could make you believe he had conquered life itself. Yet, on this particular evening, Barry's world begins to shift with a single innocent comment from a young boy named Justin. Justin, with the blunt honesty only a child can muster, notices something peculiar, a birthmark on Barry's hand identical to his own. What starts as a curious remark stirs something deep within Barry, igniting a journey into a past he thought he had left behind. A journey that would uncover family secrets, redefine his understanding of legacy, and transform his life in ways he never imagined. But let me tell you, this isn't just a story of mystery and revelation. It's a story of compassion, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love, themes that resonate with every soul willing to listen. If you find yourself moved by this tale, let's build a connection. Subscribe to this channel and join a community that celebrates stories of heart and humanity. And in the comments, why not share your own inspiration? Perhaps something like, "I open my heart to the hidden truths that bring us closer to one another." Now let us dive into the heart of this story, where the simplest details, a birthmark, a boy's curiosity, reveal truths that will leave you pondering the complexities of fate and family. It was a crisp spring evening when Birthmark first met Justin. Barry, a man of refined taste and abundant fortune, was hosting a charity gala at his sprawling estate. The event sparkled with opulence, chandeliers casting golden light over polished marble floors, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne, and conversations buzzing with admiration for Barry's philanthropy. Among the sea of guests stood Justin, a boy no older than 7, clutching his father's hand as they approached Barry to thank him for sponsoring the education fund that had changed their family's life. Barry, ever the charismatic host, knelt to meet the boy's gaze, exchanging pleasantries with a warmth that made even the shyest child smile. But then Justin tilted his head, his innocent eyes narrowing with curiosity. He pointed at Barry's hand, his voice cutting through the hum of the room. "You have my birthmark." The room grew quiet, the moment hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Barry's gaze followed Justin's pointing finger to his own hand, a small crescent-shaped mark nestled near his thumb. For a moment, Barry's polished demeanor faltered. He had seen this mark every day of his life, but had never considered it significant. Yet here was this boy, a stranger, claiming it as his own. Barry chuckled to ease the tension, brushing off the comment as coincidence. But as the evening wore on, the boy's words lingered in his mind. How could such a specific mark, so identical in shape and placement, appear on the hand of a child he had never met? Later that night, in the quiet solitude of his study, Barry found himself staring at his hand. Memories long buried began to surface, memories of his childhood, of whispers and half-truths exchanged behind closed doors. His parents had always been evasive about their family history, brushing off questions with vague answers that left him feeling both curious and incomplete. Barry's curiosity turned to resolve. He decided he could no longer ignore the tugging at his heart, the feeling that this birthmark might be more than a mere coincidence. The boy's father, Eric Darren, had mentioned their family came from a small town Barry had only heard of in passing. It was there. Barry decided that he would begin his search for answers. The following week, Barry's private investigator delivered a dossier that revealed far more than Barry had anticipated. The Darrens were not just any family. They were connected to his own in ways that raised more questions than answers. Old newspaper clippings hinted at a scandal involving Barry's late uncle, Lawrence Mick, and a mysterious disappearance tied to the Darren lineage. Barry's heart raced as he read through the documents. One headline stood out: "Mick family heir and the forgotten tragedy." The article detailed an estate fire that had claimed the life of Lawrence Mick decades earlier. Barry had been a child at the time, shielded from the grim details by his parents. But now, reading about it as an adult, he began to sense that the fire was no accident, and that its aftermath had left scars on more than just the Mick family. Among the papers was an old photograph of Lawrence Mick standing beside a woman Barry didn't recognize. Her eyes, though kind, seemed haunted. In her arms was a baby. Barry's pulse quickened as he noticed the faint outline of a birthmark on the infant's tiny hand, a mark identical to his own. This discovery left Barry reeling. Could this woman be Justin's ancestor? And if so, what did that make Barry? The idea of a shared bloodline between himself and the Darrens seemed absurd yet undeniable. Determined to uncover the truth, Barry packed his bags and made his way to the small town where the Darren family had lived for generations. His arrival was met with polite curiosity, but Barry quickly realized that probing into old family matters was unwelcome. Doors closed in his face, and questions about the Mick family were met with stony silence. Finally, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the town's librarian, an elderly woman who remembered the events surrounding the Mick estate fire. Over cups of tea in the quiet library, she shared stories of Lawrence Mick's charm, his fiery temper, and his doomed relationship with a woman from the Darren family. They were star-crossed, she said with a wistful smile. Two hearts caught in a web of family expectations and secrets. Some say the fire was an accident, others say it was revenge. Barry left the library with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but the picture they formed was far from complete. One thing was certain. Justin's observation had opened a door to a past Barry could no longer ignore. As Barry returned to his estate, his thoughts were consumed by the connections he had uncovered. The birthmark was no longer just a quirk of genetics. It was a symbol of a shared history that demanded to be understood. But what would he find if he kept digging? And how would the truth shape his understanding of himself, his family, and his legacy? Little did Barry know. The answers he sought would force him to confront painful truths about his family's past and his own identity. As he delves deeper, shocking revelations await secrets that will test his resolve and challenge everything he thought he knew. Stay with us as the story unfolds. Barry Mick was no stranger to unexpected twists in life. As a businessman, he had faced corporate betrayals, market crashes, and moments of triumph that had shaped his reputation as a resilient and shrewd leader. Yet nothing had prepared him for the emotional weight of what he was about to uncover. After his trip to the town library, Barry found himself grappling with an overwhelming mix of emotions: curiosity, dread, and an undeniable sense of urgency. The photograph of his Uncle Lawrence with the mysterious woman holding a baby haunted him. The librarian's words echoed in his mind. Two hearts caught in a web of family expectations and secrets. Barry's first step was to confront the fragmented memories of his own childhood. He sat in the quiet of his study, surrounded by relics of his past, faded photographs, letters and mementos that once seemed insignificant, but now held the potential to unlock hidden truths. One particular photo caught his attention, a family portrait taken at the Mick estate. In the background, barely noticeable, stood a young woman with the same kind eyes as the one in the photograph from the library. Who was she? Barry murmured aloud, his voice heavy with frustration. The name Darren surfaced repeatedly as he dug deeper into his family's archives. A hidden drawer in his Uncle Lawrence's old desk revealed a bundle of letters addressed to Isabel Darren. The letters were worn with age, their ink faded but still legible. As Barry read, the story unfolded like a tragic novel. The letters spoke of a forbidden romance between Lawrence Mick and Isabel Darren, love that defied the rigid social structures of their time. The Mick family, steeped in wealth and prestige, had deemed the Darrens unworthy of their son. Lawrence's rebellion against his family's wishes had ignited tensions that simmered for years, culminating in the catastrophic fire that claimed his life. One letter, dated just weeks before the fire, hinted at a secret that Lawrence and Isabel had hoped to protect. Dearest Isabel, no matter what they say, our love is pure, and our child will be a testament to that. I cannot wait to hold our little one and show the world that love can triumph over hate. But we must be cautious. They are watching us, waiting for any excuse to tear us apart. Barry's hands trembled as he realized the implications. Lawrence and Isabel had a child who, if still alive, would be the missing link between the Mick and Darren families. Could this child be one of Justin's ancestors? Fueled by a determination to uncover the truth, Barry sought out Eric Darren, Justin's father. Arranging a meeting was no easy task. Eric was a reserved man who valued his privacy and rarely interacted with outsiders. But Barry's persistence paid off, and the two men finally met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. Eric was cautious, his demeanor guarded as Barry broached the subject of their family's connection. "I'm not sure what you're hoping to find," Eric said, his voice tinged with skepticism. "I'm hoping to understand," Barry replied earnestly. "There's a history between our families, one that I believe has shaped both of our lives in ways we may not fully comprehend. Your son, Justin, recognized something in me, and it has led me down a path I can't ignore." Eric's expression softened slightly at the mention of his son. He took a deep breath before speaking. "There's something you should know," he said, his voice low. "My grandfather used to tell stories about a woman named Isabel, a woman he claimed was wronged by the Mick family. She disappeared after the fire, taking her child with her. No one knows what happened to them, but my grandfather always believed they were driven away by the Micks." Barry felt a pang of guilt as Eric spoke. The idea that his family's actions had forced Isabel and her child into hiding filled him with shame. He knew he had to dig deeper, even if the truth was painful. Through Eric, Barry gained access to old family records that painted a clearer picture of Isabel's life after the fire. She had fled to a neighboring town, where she raised her child in obscurity, far from the reach of the Mick family. The records also revealed that Isabel's child had grown up, married, and started a family of their own, a lineage that eventually led to Justin. But the most shocking revelation came in the form of an old birth certificate. Barry's heart skipped a beat as he read the name of Isabel's child, Lawrence Darren Mick. The child had been given a hyphenated surname, a bold statement of Isabel's refusal to erase Lawrence Mick's legacy from her life. For Barry, this discovery was both exhilarating and devastating. It confirmed that he and Justin were connected by blood, sharing a lineage that had been fractured by the choices of their ancestors. But it also raised troubling questions about the Mick family's role in the events that had driven Isabel and her child away. Determined to piece together the full story, Barry revisited the Mick estate, now abandoned and overgrown with vines. Walking through the charred remains of the mansion, he felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the physical destruction, but for the emotional wounds that had festered for decades. In the remains of what had once been his uncle's study, Barry discovered a journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The journal, written in Lawrence Mick's hand, chronicled his love for Isabel and his determination to defy his family's expectations. One entry stood out. "They think they can dictate my life, but they cannot dictate my heart. Isabel is my future, and I will fight for her and our child, no matter the cost. If the fire was meant to destroy us, they have failed. Our love will endure in the lives of those who come after us." Tears welled in Barry's eyes as he read his uncle's words. The fire, he realized, was not just a physical event, but a metaphor for the destruction of love, trust, and family bonds. And yet, despite the pain, there was hope, a chance to rebuild and heal the fractures of the past. As Barry left the estate, clutching the journal and letters, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but he now had the tools to confront the truths that had been hidden for so long. Barry's next step would bring him face to face with Eric Darren once more, as the two men worked to unravel the final pieces of their shared history. But would the revelation strengthen their bond or drive them further apart? And how would Justin, the innocent boy who started it all, come to understand the legacy he had inherited? Stay with us as the story takes a transformative turn. Barry Mick had always prided himself on his ability to stay composed in the face of challenges, but this journey was unlike any he had faced before. As he stood at the threshold of Eric Darren's modest home, journal and letters in hand, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. What if Eric refused to listen? What if the truths he uncovered only deepened the rift between their families? But Barry knew he couldn't turn back. He had to see this through not just for himself, but for Justin, Eric, and the generations shaped by the choices and tragedies of the past. Eric greeted Barry with a wary expression, his body language stiff but polite. The two men sat at the kitchen table, a pot of coffee between them, the air thick with unspoken tension. Barry placed the journal and letters on the table, his voice steady but earnest. "Eric," he began, "I know this isn't easy, but I've uncovered some things about our families, about your family and mine, that I believe you need to see." Eric hesitated before reaching for the journal. As he flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from skepticism to shock and, finally, quiet understanding. The letters from Lawrence to Isabel, the birth certificate of Lawrence Darren Mick, and the journal's heartfelt entries painted a picture of a love that had been silenced but never extinguished. "They wanted to erase her," Eric said softly, his voice tinged with bitterness. But Isabel refused to let them. She fought to keep her story alive, even if it meant living in the shadows. Barry nodded, his own emotions mirroring Eric's. "And now it's our turn to bring that story to light. We can't change what happened, but we can choose to honor their legacy by mending what was broken." The conversation that followed was raw and honest, a cathartic exchange between two men bound by a shared history they had only just begun to understand. Eric shared memories passed down from his grandfather's stories of Isabel's strength, her determination to protect her child, and the quiet resilience that defined her life. Barry, in turn, recounted his own fragmented memories of the Mick family, his parents' reluctance to speak of Lawrence, the whispers of scandal that had followed the fire, and the nagging feeling that the truth had always been just out of reach. Together, they pieced together the final threads of the story. Isabel had fled with her child, not out of fear, but out of love, a fierce, unyielding love that refused to let her son grow up in a world where he would be seen as an outcast. She had built a new life for herself and her child, instilling in him the values of compassion, integrity, and resilience that would become the foundation of the Darren family. But as the conversation deepened, Barry and Eric realized that their journey was far from over. The truths they had uncovered were not just personal, they were a call to action. "We have to do more than just acknowledge the past," Barry said, his voice firm with conviction. "We have to confront it head on. That means reaching out to others who were affected by these events, uncovering the full extent of what happened, and making amends where we can." Eric nodded, his resolve matching Barry's. "It won't be easy," he said. "There are people who won't want to revisit these wounds. But if we don't try, we'll be perpetuating the same cycle of silence and pain." The two men began planning their next steps, starting with a visit to the estate where Lawrence and Isabel's story had begun. Though the Mick estate was now a shadow of its former self, it held the key to understanding the events that had shaped their family's destinies. As they walked through the overgrown grounds, Eric pointed out landmarks described in the journal. The garden where Lawrence and Isabel had shared stolen moments, the old oak tree that had witnessed their promises of love, and the ruins of the study where Lawrence had written his heartfelt letters. For Barry, the visit was both heartbreaking and healing. Each step through the estate brought him closer to the uncle he had never truly known, a man whose choices had been driven by love, but overshadowed by tragedy. One final discovery awaited them in the ruins of the study, a hidden compartment in the fireplace that contained a stack of photographs and a small locket. The photographs depicted Lawrence, Isabel, and their child in moments of quiet joy, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had defined their lives. The locket, inscribed with the initials L and I, held a tiny portrait of the two lovers, their faces radiant with hope. Barry and Eric stood in silence, the weight of the discovery settling over them. The locket was a symbol of everything they had lost, but also of everything they stood to gain by continuing their journey of truth and reconciliation. As they left the estate, Barry felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was no longer just about uncovering the past. It was about forging a new future, one that honored the sacrifices of Lawrence and Isabel, while breaking the cycle of pain and division. But even as Barry and Eric began to chart a path forward, they faced an even greater challenge. bringing their families together and confronting the prejudices and fears that had kept them apart for generations. Could they find the strength to heal old wounds and build a legacy of unity and compassion? Or would the shadows of the past prove too powerful to overcome? Stay with us as the story takes a transformative step toward redemption. The weight of the revelations thus far had been immense, but Barry Mick and Eric Darren both understood that their journey was approaching a critical juncture. They had uncovered the truth about their shared history, but the task of addressing the present and reconciling the fractures that still existed between their families was a far more daunting challenge. Barry knew he needed to meet Justin again, not just as the curious boy who sparked this journey, but as the living embodiment of the connection between their two families. Arrangements were made for Barry to visit Eric's home once more, this time with the intention of sharing the full story with Justin and beginning the process of healing. As Barry approached the Darren home, a sense of trepidation crept in. What could he say to a child so young, yet so pivotal in this narrative? How could he explain the complexities of a past that had shaped both their lives in profound and unexpected ways? Justin greeted Barry with the same bright, curious eyes that had started it all. He tugged on Barry's sleeve, pointing again to the birthmark on his hand. "Did you figure it out?" Justin asked, his voice filled with innocent excitement. Barry smiled, kneeling to Justin's level. "I did, Justin. And what I found is a story about love, courage, and family, a story that connects you and me in ways we couldn't have imagined." Justin's eyes widened with wonder, but Barry turned his attention to Eric. "Before I explain everything to Justin," he said, "there's someone else I need to speak with." Eric nodded knowingly. The person Barry referred to was Eric's father, Justin's grandfather, man who had lived through the tail end of the Isabel and Lawrence saga. His perspective, Barry believed, would be invaluable in piecing together the final parts of their shared history. The elderly man, David Darren, was frail but sharp-eyed, his demeanor a mix of curiosity and wariness as Barry entered the room. Barry introduced himself, offering the journal and letters as evidence of his intent. David examined the items carefully, his hands trembling slightly as he traced the faded ink. "These belong to her," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "My grandmother. She spoke of Lawrence often, you know, always with love, even after everything." The conversation that followed was transformative. David recounted stories of Isabel's resilience, her struggles to rebuild her life after fleeing the Mick estate, and her unwavering commitment to raising her child with dignity and love. "She used to say that love wasn't something you could bury," David said, his eyes glistening with tears. "No matter how deep the hurt, it finds a way to endure." Barry shared his own reflections, expressing regret for the actions of his family and a heartfelt desire to mend the rift between their bloodlines. The exchange was raw and honest, a meeting of two men bound by the weight of history but united by a shared hope for the future. The conversation turned to Justin, the youngest link in their lineage. David's face softened as Barry spoke of the boy's role in sparking this journey of discovery. "He's the best of us," David said with a faint smile. "Maybe that's why he saw the connection when we couldn't." The following day, Barry and Eric sat Justin down to explain the story. With careful words and gentle tones, they told him about Lawrence and Isabel, about the fire that had driven their families apart, and about the courage it took to uncover the truth. Justin listened intently, his young mind processing the gravity of what he was hearing. "So," he said after a long pause, "that means we're family, right?" Barry's heart swelled at the simplicity of Justin's question. "Yes, Justin," he replied. "We are family, and that means we have a chance to make things better, not just for us, but for everyone who came before us and everyone who will come after." Over the next few weeks, Barry and Eric worked together to bridge the gap between their families. They hosted gatherings, shared stories, and encouraged open dialogue about the past. The process was not without its challenges. There were moments of tension, tears, and even resistance from some family members who struggled to reconcile with the painful history. But slowly, progress was made. The Mick and Darren families began to see each other not as adversaries, but as individuals connected by a shared humanity. One particularly poignant moment came during a family gathering at the Mick estate, now partially restored as a tribute to Lawrence and Isabel. Barry unveiled a plaque bearing the words of Lawrence's journal, "Our love will endure in the lives of those who come after us." The plaque was placed beneath the old oak tree where Lawrence and Isabel had once shared their dreams. As the family stood together, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. Justin, ever the curious and thoughtful child, placed his small hand on Barry's. "We did it, didn't we?" he asked. Barry smiled, his voice filled with pride. "Yes, Justin, we did it. And this is just the beginning." As the bonds between the Mick and Darren families strengthen, Barry begins to reflect on the deeper implications of legacy. What does it truly mean to leave a mark on the world? In the next chapter, Barry confronts this question and embarks on a journey to redefine his concept of success, proving that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the connections we nurture. Stay with us for this profound exploration of legacy and purpose. Barry Mick had always equated legacy with wealth, power, and influence. For years, his towering achievements in business, his philanthropic ventures, and his name etched in marble plaques around the city had given him a sense of fulfillment. But as he sat beneath the old oak tree at the Mick estate, surrounded by the mingling laughter of the Mick and Darren families, he felt a quiet revelation stirring within him. Perhaps legacy was about something far more profound. For the first time in his life, Barry wasn't thinking about his assets or his status. He was thinking about Justin's question. "We're family, right?" That simple, earnest inquiry had redefined everything he thought he knew about his purpose in life. The events of the past weeks had been transformative. Barry had forged a new connection with Eric, Justin, and even David Darren, the elder patriarch who had once harbored deep resentment toward the Mick name. Together, they had revisited the sites of their shared history, exchanged memories, and uncovered truths that had remained hidden for decades. But now Barry found himself pondering what it all meant for the future. His reflections led him to a question that had been quietly gnawing at the edges of his mind. What do I leave behind when I'm gone? For years, the answer had seemed obvious. His sprawling estate, his charitable foundations, and the businesses he had built were testaments to his life's work. Yet, in the face of the stories he had uncovered, stories of love, sacrifice, and resilience, these accomplishments suddenly felt hollow. Barry decided to seek insight from those around him. He began by visiting Eric, who was busy repairing a broken fence in his backyard. The simplicity of Eric's life, filled with honest work and deep family bonds, struck Barry in a way it never had before. "Eric," Barry began, leaning against the fence post, "what does legacy mean to you?" Eric paused, considering the question as he wiped his hands on a cloth. "To me, legacy isn't about what you leave behind in material terms," he said thoughtfully. "It's about the impact you have on the people you care about, how you shape their lives, and the values you pass down. My grandfather used to say that a good legacy isn't written in stone. It's written in the hearts of those who remember you." Barry nodded, Eric's words resonating deeply. They reminded him of something Lawrence had written in his journal. "Our love will endure in the lives of those who come after us." Inspired by Eric's perspective, Barry reached out to David Darren, hoping the elder might offer further wisdom. David, despite his years, still tended a small garden behind his home, a peaceful sanctuary where he found solace. Barry found David trimming a row of roses, his movements slow but deliberate. The two men talked about the family's recent reconciliation, and Barry broached the topic of legacy. David smiled, his hands resting on the handle of his shears. "Legacy, Barry, is a funny thing," he said. "When you're young, you think it's about making a name for yourself, about building something that will outlast you. But as you get older, you realize it's about relationships, about how you treat people, the memories you create, and the love you leave behind." He gestured to the roses, their vibrant blooms swaying gently in the breeze. "These flowers, for example, they don't last forever, but their beauty, their fragrance, it lingers in the minds of those who stop to admire them. That's how I see legacy. It's not about permanence, it's about presence." Barry left David's garden feeling both humbled and inspired. The idea that legacy was less about tangible achievements and more about emotional and relational impact was a revelation he hadn't fully considered. In the weeks that followed, Barry began to realign his priorities. He invested more time in his relationships, particularly with Justin. The boy had a natural curiosity and kindness that reminded Barry of Lawrence's description of Isabella, parallel that brought both joy and a sense of responsibility. One afternoon, Barry invited Justin to his estate for a day of exploration. Together, they walked through the gardens, visited the restored Mick family library, and talked about dreams and aspirations. "Do you know what you want to be when you grow up?" Barry asked as they sat beneath the oak tree. Justin shrugged, his face thoughtful. "Maybe a teacher or an artist. Or maybe I'll just help people like you do." Barry smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Whatever you choose to do, Justin, remember this. Your greatest legacy won't be what you do, but how you make people feel. That's something I'm only just starting to understand." Barry also took steps to ensure that the lessons he had learned were passed down in a meaningful way. He established a new charitable foundation, not in his name but in honor of Lawrence and Isabel. The foundation's mission was simple: to support families in need, promote education, and foster reconciliation in communities divided by conflict or misunderstanding. The launch event for the foundation was held at the Mick estate, with both the Mick and Darren families in attendance. Barry delivered a heartfelt speech, acknowledging the mistakes of the past while expressing hope for the future. "We cannot change the events that brought us here," he said, his voice steady and clear. "But we can honor those who came before us by building something better for those who will come after. Let this foundation stand as a symbol of what is possible when we choose compassion over division, understanding over judgment, and love over fear." The applause that followed was not just for Barry, but for the journey he and the families had undertaken together. A journey of truth, healing, and transformation. As the evening wound down, Barry found himself once again beneath the oak tree, Justin by his side. The boy had fallen asleep, his head resting on Barry's shoulder. For a moment, Barry closed his eyes and let the quiet of the night envelop him. In that moment, he realized that his legacy wasn't about being remembered as a wealthy philanthropist or a successful businessman. It was about the connections he had made, the lives he had touched, and the values he had instilled in those who would carry his story forward. Barry looked down at Justin, his heart full of gratitude and love. "This," he whispered, "is what truly matters." But as Barry's understanding of legacy deepens, another challenge arises: how to ensure that the reconciliation between the Mick and Darren families becomes a lasting one. In the next chapter, Barry will explore the role of forgiveness in healing wounds that run generations deep, proving that true redemption requires more than acknowledgement. It demands a willingness to let go of the past. Stay with us for this heartfelt exploration of forgiveness and its transformative power. Barry Mick's journey of discovery had been transformative, but it wasn't until he reflected on the generations affected by his family's decisions that the full weight of his task became clear. The choices made by Lawrence Mick and Isabel Darren, both courageous and tragic, had rippled through time, shaping the lives of their descendants in ways neither could have imagined. As Barry watched Justin play in the garden one afternoon, he realized that the story of their families wasn't just about the past. It was about the future, a future that held the promise of unity, understanding, and hope. Barry's reflections began with his own childhood. He remembered the unspoken tension that often lingered in the Mick household, the whispered conversations about family scandals, and the way questions about his uncle Lawrence were always deflected. Growing up, Barry had absorbed a sense of duty and ambition, but also a subtle fear of looking too deeply into the family's past. Now he understood why. The Mick family had buried its pain rather than facing it, creating a legacy of avoidance and emotional distance. It wasn't until Justin's innocent comment about the birthmark that the cycle began to break. But what of the Darren family? Barry knew their story was one of resilience and quiet strength. Isabel's decision to flee with her child had been an act of defiance, a way to protect her son from the hostility of the Mick family. That courage had been passed down through the generations, shaping a lineage that valued integrity and compassion over wealth or power. To better understand this impact, Barry visited David Darren once more. The elderly patriarch welcomed Barry warmly, sensing that this visit carried a deeper purpose. "David," Barry began, "I've been thinking about how our family's choices have shaped us. Not just you and me, but Justin and everyone who came before us. I'd like to hear your perspective on how the past has influenced the Darrens." David nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Isabel was a remarkable woman," he said. "She taught her son, and through him, all of us, that love and integrity are worth more than anything money can buy. We grew up hearing stories of her strength, her refusal to let bitterness consume her. She always said that the greatest gift you can give the next generation is the freedom to live without hatred." Barry felt a pang of humility as he listened. The Darrens had taken the pain inflicted upon them and turned it into a source of strength, creating a legacy of love and resilience. In contrast, the Mick family had allowed their wounds to fester, prioritizing reputation over reconciliation. "What about the anger?" Barry asked hesitantly. "Didn't anyone feel the need to fight back?" David sighed. "Of course there was anger, especially in the early years. But Isabel always believed that holding onto anger only prolongs the hurt. She taught us to focus on what we could control, our actions, our values, and the way we treat others. That's the legacy she left us." Inspired by David's words, Barry began to reflect on how he could reshape the Mick family's legacy for future generations. He knew it wasn't enough to uncover the truth or reconcile with the Darrens. He needed to ensure that the lessons learned would endure. One of his first steps was to create a family archive. With Eric's help, Barry compiled photographs, letters, and recordings that told the full story of their shared history. The archive included not just the triumphs but also the mistakes, serving as a reminder that growth comes from acknowledging and learning from the past. Barry also started a new tradition at the Mick estate, an annual gathering of the Mick and Darren families. The event was more than a celebration. It was an opportunity for both families to come together, share stories, and strengthen the bonds they had worked so hard to rebuild. During the first gathering, Barry gave a speech beneath the oak tree where Lawrence and Isabel's love had blossomed. His voice was steady, filled with a sense of purpose. "Today, we honor not just the courage of Lawrence and Isabel, but the resilience of everyone who came after them. Their story is a reminder that our choices don't just affect us, they echo through time, shaping the lives of those who come after us. Let us commit to making choices that build bridges, not walls, and that leave a legacy of love and understanding for the generations to come." The impact of these efforts was immediate and profound. The younger generations of both families, including Justin, began to embrace the idea that their shared history was a source of strength rather than division. One particularly poignant moment came when Justin, inspired by his conversations with Barry and Eric, decided to write a school essay about the birthmark that had connected them all. In his essay, Justin described the birthmark as a symbol of resilience and unity, a reminder that even the smallest details can hold great significance. Barry was moved to tears when he read the essay. It was a clear sign that the work he and Eric had done was taking root, influencing the next generation in ways they could only begin to imagine. As Barry continued his efforts, he also began to think about the broader implications of his journey. He saw parallels between his family's story and the challenges faced by communities around the world: divisions caused by misunderstandings, pain perpetuated by silence, and the need for reconciliation and empathy. This realization led Barry to expand the mission of the foundation he had established. In addition to supporting families in need, the foundation began hosting workshops on conflict resolution and intergenerational healing. Barry believed that by sharing his family's story, he could inspire others to embark on their own journeys of truth and reconciliation. One evening, as Barry sat with Justin under the oak tree, the boy turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" Justin asked, his voice filled with earnest curiosity. Barry placed a gentle hand on Justin's shoulder. "I think they'd be more than proud," he said. "I think they'd be grateful. grateful that we've chosen to honor their love by building something beautiful out of their struggles. And I think they'd want us to keep going, to make sure that what we've started lasts for generations. But even as Barry and the family celebrate the progress they've made, one final hurdle remains: the act of forgiveness, not just between individuals, but within themselves. Can Barry and Eric let go of the lingering pain and guilt that still shadows their hearts? In the next chapter, we'll explore the transformative power of forgiveness and how it can bring closure to even the deepest wounds. Stay with us as we approach the heart of this remarkable journey. Forgiveness is a word that rolls easily off the tongue, yet carries a weight that can anchor even the strongest souls. For Barry Mick, the concept had been an abstract one, something he admired in theory, but had rarely practiced in the way life now demanded. Over the weeks of reconciling with the Darren family, he had seen forgiveness at work in the actions of others, in Eric's willingness to hear his story, in David Darren's decision to embrace the truth, and in Justin's childlike ability to see past division. Yet, Barry knew that forgiveness wasn't something he had fully embraced, not for his family, not for himself. One evening, Barry stood before the large mirror in his bedroom, staring into his own eyes. In the quiet of that moment, he felt the weight of generations pressing down on him, the decisions of his ancestors, the pain they had caused, and the legacy of avoidance that had shaped his life. He thought of his parents, who had buried the truth about Lawrence Mick rather than confronting it. He thought of Isabel Darren, whose life had been upended by the Mick family's actions, forcing her into exile. And he thought of himself, how he had benefited from the privileges of his family's wealth while remaining ignorant of the pain that wealth had cost others. Forgiveness begins here, Barry whispered, placing a hand over his heart. The next morning, Barry invited Eric to join him for a walk through the restored Mick estate. Eric accepted, curious about the purpose of the invitation. The two men strolled through the gardens, their steps slow and thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness," Barry began, his voice steady but introspective. "We've come so far, but I realize I've never truly asked for it. Not from you, not from your family, and not even from myself." Eric stopped walking, turning to face Barry. His expression was calm, but his eyes were searching. "What do you feel you need forgiveness for?" "For everything," Barry replied. "For the way my family treated yours, for the silence that allowed that pain to linger, and for my own complicity in ignoring the truth for so long." Eric considered Barry's words for a moment before responding. "You've done more than most would to make amends," he said. "But forgiveness isn't just about what you've done. It's about what you're willing to let go of. Are you ready to forgive yourself?" Barry felt a lump form in his throat. He realized that while he had been seeking forgiveness from others, he had been holding himself captive to guilt and regret. "I think I'm ready," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That evening, Barry held a small gathering beneath the oak tree for both the Mick and Darren families. He spoke openly about the journey they had all undertaken and the lessons he had learned along the way. "Forgiveness is a gift," he said, his voice resonating with emotion. "It's not just something we give to others, it's something we give to ourselves. It's the act of releasing the chains of anger, guilt, and resentment so that we can move forward, free to create a better future." Barry then turned to David Darren, addressing the elder with profound respect. "David, I want to thank you for your grace and understanding. Your willingness to share your family story has been a gift, and I hope that my actions have shown how deeply I regret the pain my family caused." David stood, his frail hands steady as he spoke. "Barry, forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing not to let it define the future. I've seen the sincerity in your actions, and for that, I forgive you. But more importantly, I hope you'll forgive yourself." The words hung in the air, a moment of profound release that seemed to ripple through everyone present. Later that night, Barry found himself alone beneath the oak tree, the soft rustle of leaves a comforting presence. Justin appeared, holding a small notebook in his hands. "Uncle Barry," Justin said, sitting beside him. "I wrote something for you." Barry smiled, his heart swelling at the boy's gesture. He took the notebook and began to read. It was a letter simple, heartfelt, and wise beyond Justin's years. You taught me that forgiveness is about love, the letter began. It's about loving yourself enough to let go of hurt and loving others enough to give them a second chance. Thank you for teaching me that. Barry closed the notebook, tears glistening in his eyes. He pulled Justin into a warm embrace, his heart filled with gratitude for the boy who had been the catalyst for this incredible journey. The act of forgiveness had transformed Barry in ways he hadn't anticipated. He felt lighter, freer, and more connected to those around him. He no longer saw himself as a man defined by his family's mistakes, but as someone who could use those mistakes as a foundation for growth and healing. Barry's final act of forgiveness was a personal one. He wrote a letter to Lawrence Mick, addressing it as if his uncle could somehow read it. "Dear Lawrence," he wrote, "I now understand the depth of your love for Isabel and the courage it took to defy the expectations placed upon you. I forgive you for the choices you made, and I hope you can forgive me for taking so long to honor your story. Your love has endured, just as you hoped it would." He placed the letter beneath the plaque at the oak tree, a symbolic gesture of closure and gratitude. With forgiveness as the final piece of the puzzle, Barry is ready to move forward. But the journey isn't over yet. In the final chapter, Barry reflects on the power of healing and reconciliation, sharing the ultimate lessons he has learned and inspiring others to embark on their own journeys of transformation. Stay with us for a moving conclusion that ties together the threads of this remarkable story. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden light across the Mick estate. For Barry Mick, this evening felt different, a quiet culmination of months filled with revelations, reconciliations, and introspection. Sitting under the oak tree, he gazed at the locket and journal that had guided him through this remarkable journey. Nearby, the laughter of both the Mick and Darren families intertwined, echoing like a symphony of hope across the grounds. But tonight wasn't just about closure. It was about celebrating the healing that had taken root in their lives. Barry had spent the past weeks ensuring that the bonds between the Mick and Darren families were not only acknowledged but nurtured. The annual gatherings he had initiated were already becoming a cherished tradition, a way to cement the unity that had emerged from the ashes of a once divided legacy. At this evening's gathering, Barry had invited not only family members but also close friends, neighbors, and those who had been touched by the foundation he had established. The event was modest yet heartfelt, with tables set under the open sky, candles flickering in the gentle breeze, and dishes prepared from family recipes shared by both sides. As the meal was served, Barry stood to address the gathering. The conversations quieted and all eyes turned to him. "I want to thank each of you for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying both strength and emotion. "This gathering represents more than just an occasion to share food and stories. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we choose understanding over judgment, love over fear, and truth over silence." He gestured toward the plaque beneath the oak tree, where Lawrence's words were inscribed. For years, this tree stood as a silent witness to a love that refused to be extinguished. Today, it stands as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal if we have the courage to face them. The applause that followed wasn't boisterous. It was gentle and heartfelt, a ripple of shared emotion that bound everyone in attendance. Later that evening, Barry sat with Eric and David Darren, their conversation a mix of lighthearted memories and deeper reflections. "I never thought I'd see this day," David admitted, his voice tinged with wonder. "There was a time when the name Mick brought nothing but pain to my family. But now, it feels like we've turned a page." Barry nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure we don't turn back," he said. Eric leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's not just about us, though," he said. "It's about the example we're setting for Justin and the generations that come after him. They'll grow up knowing that love and forgiveness are stronger than anger and resentment." Justin, ever the curious and thoughtful child, had spent much of the evening darting between tables, sharing stories about his adventures with Barry. But as the night wore on, he returned to his favorite spot beneath the oak tree, where Barry was now sitting alone. "Uncle Barry," Justin said, climbing into the chair beside him, Do you think this is what Isabel and Lawrence would have wanted? Barry smiled, pulling the boy close. I think they would have been proud of all of us, he said. They loved deeply, and that love endured through everything. It's why we're here today. Justin nodded, his small hand tracing the birthmark on Barry's. Do you think this birthmark was their way of making sure we found each other? Barry chuckled, marveling at the boy's perceptiveness. Maybe it was, he said. Or maybe it's just a reminder that no matter where we come from, we're all connected in ways we can't always see. As the evening drew to a close, Barry felt a sense of peace unlike any he had ever known. The journey had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt, pain, and fear. But it had also been a journey of growth, one that had taught him the value of truth, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of love. Standing beneath the oak tree, Barry looked out at the families gathered before him, their laughter and conversation filling the night air. He realized that the true measure of his life wasn't in his wealth or achievements, but in the connections he had nurtured, and the legacy of healing and unity he was leaving behind. Barry placed a hand on the plaque, a quiet prayer of gratitude in his heart. "Thank you," he whispered, his words meant for Lawrence, Isabel, and all those who had come before. "Thank you for showing me what truly matters." With the families united and the past reconciled, Barry's journey has reached its heartfelt conclusion. But his story doesn't end here. In the final chapter, Barry shares the universal lessons he's learned, lessons about compassion, resilience, and the importance of leaving a legacy rooted in love. Join us as we reflect on these powerful truths and celebrate the transformative journey that brought us here. As the sun rose over the Mick estate the morning after the gathering, Barry Mick sat at his desk, pen in hand, ready to write the final entry in what had become his personal reflection journal. Before him lay an open notebook, its pages filled with the lessons and revelations that had defined the most transformative period of his life. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves outside, a soothing reminder of the oak tree that had stood witness to so much history. Barry took a deep breath and began to write. To those who come after me, if you are reading this, it means the story of our family has continued, weaving its way through time, bringing together new voices, new faces, and new hopes. I write these words not as a man defined by wealth or success, but as someone who has learned the true meaning of legacy, love, and forgiveness. There was a time when I believed legacy was about what we build with our hands, monuments, businesses, fortunes. But I've come to see that true legacy is built with the heart. It's found in the connections we nurture, the kindness we show, and the healing we bring to others. The journey that led me to this understanding was not an easy one. It was filled with moments of doubt, pain, and reckoning. But it was also a journey of growth and discovery, a journey that taught me the power of compassion, the importance of truth, and the beauty of forgiveness. Barry paused, his pen hovering above the page as he thought back to the pivotal moments that had shaped his journey. He thought of Justin's innocent observation, the birthmark that had connected them, and the courage it had taken to confront the truths buried in his family's history. He thought of Eric, David, and the Darren family, who had welcomed him into their lives despite the pain of the past. And he thought of the oak tree, a silent, steadfast symbol of resilience and hope that had become a cornerstone of their shared story. To those who find themselves burdened by the weight of the past, he continued, know that the path to healing begins with a single step, the willingness to face the truth. It may be painful, and it may take time, but the rewards are worth every moment of struggle. Truth is the foundation upon which love and forgiveness can be built. And to those who wonder if forgiveness is possible, I offer this. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but about choosing to let go of its hold on your future. It is a gift we give not only to others, but to ourselves. A gift that frees us to live with open hearts and unburdened souls. Lastly, to those who seek to leave a mark on the world, remember this. The greatest legacy you can leave is one of kindness, understanding, and love. These are the things that endure, transcending time and space, shaping the lives of those who come after us. As Barry finished writing, a sense of peace settled over him. He closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf beside Lawrence's journal. knowing that his story and the stories of those who came before him would now live on for future generations to learn from and build upon. He stepped outside, the morning light warming his face as he walked toward the oak tree. Justin was already there, sitting on the grass with a notebook of his own, scribbling away with the unfiltered enthusiasm of a child. "What are you working on?" Barry asked, sitting down beside him. Justin grinned, holding up the notebook. "I'm writing about what I want to be when I grow up." Barry smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "And what's that?" Justin thought for a moment before replying. "I want to be someone who helps people see how connected we all are like you did." Barry's smile widened. "You're already well on your way, Justin." As the day unfolded, Barry felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew his work wasn't finished. There were still lives to touch, lessons to share, and connections to build. But for the first time, he felt ready to embrace whatever the future held, secure in the knowledge that he had built a legacy worth passing on. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of discovery, healing, and transformation. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to take a moment to reflect on the connections in your own life and the legacy you wish to leave behind. If you found inspiration here, consider subscribing to our channel to explore more stories that celebrate the power of love, truth, and human connection. And in the comments below, share your thoughts with us. Perhaps something like, "I choose to embrace truth, forgiveness, and love in my journey." Together, we can create a community that uplifts and inspires, one story at a time. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and remember, the smallest acts of kindness can leave the greatest legacy.